Gruesome Magazine.
Hello, once again. I am Doc Rotten. This is Horror News Radio, the official Gruesome Magazine podcast. Back with me again this week are the scariest, goriest, bloodiest co-host on the net. And we're here to talk about Hannibal, Season 1, Episode 3, Potage. Yes, we are revisiting Hannibal. It came out in 2013, but we loved it so we're ready to go back for a second helping or leftovers. Let's find out. Well, before we do anything, I have to introduce the crew. So let's start off with award-winning filmmaker Christopher G. Moore. How you doing, Chris? Oh, look at that background.
What's up?
You got all the guys in the crew behind you there.
I know.
Yeah,
I'm joining them. I've becoming one of the cannibals.
Yeah, who you having for dinner?
I'm a fine young cannibal.
No, bing. All right. Also joining us is podcasting rockstar and international cosplay queen, Vanessa Thompson. How you doing, Vanessa?
Ready for dinner, Doc.
Yes, you look stunning. Who are you cosplaying as?
I'm slowly trying to slip more into my Alana Bloom character. I got my contacts. Trying to look. I feel like, and if we're talking about Hannibal, I have to step up my wardrobe game because he's just so refined, and so are some of these other characters. They just look so well put together all the time. I'm like, man, I gotta look nice for this.
All right, well, Christopher, she's showing us up. We're gonna have to do something. I think you've got some props that'll help you out later on, but I'm walking in, man. I don't know. All right, well, if you don't know, Christopher and I, along with Dave Dreher, who unfortunately can't make it tonight, and Thomas Mariani, we did the Hannibal Fan podcast back in 2014 and 2015, 2016, as we covered the second and the third season. We never really got to cover the first season because we were a little late to the game, but we still wanted to talk about it. And now that it is on Netflix, all in one bingeable 3-season drop, we are taking upon ourselves to revisit our favorite show, one of our favorite shows of all time. And we're bringing Vanessa along, who did not watch it the first time around and is here to kind of give us a new, fresh look at it, while Christopher and I just kind of revisit the familiar meals of yesterday. So let's find out. We are talking about, I don't know where I'm going with that, but let's run with it. Let's talk about the third episode of season 1, called Potage. Directed by David Slade. That's one of Christopher's favorite directors of the series. It's written by David Fury, Chris Brancato, and Bryan Fuller. Of course, it's created by Bryan Fuller, based on the characters from the book Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. The cast includes Hugh, Dancy, Mads Mikkelsen, Caroline Dabernas, Hettienne Park, Lawrence Fishburne, Scott Thompson, Aaron Abrams, Casey Roll, among others. And we'll get into all of them as we get along. But what we want to do first is find out what our first impression, or our second first impression in some cases, of episode 3, Potage, may be. And Vanessa, you are first.
Loving it. That's going to be my first impression every time. It just gets better and better every episode I see. Now, this one was a little bit more of informative. I think we're digging into some characters more. We're seeing how characters tie together, how characters are being manipulated, along with some kind of, I won't say surprising or shocking deaths, but necessary, I think, to move the story along. I'm just so in love with Mads Mikkelsen and Hugh Dancy and how their relationship is developing. Will and Hannibal, the way they're really falling for each other in a way.
It's a bromance.
It's a strong bromance, but it's so much needed between the two of them. One maybe from a more manipulative stance, so he says, but I think also needed for his friendship, right? He's searching for friendship. He's searching for people that can be on his level, that he can still find a way to manipulate. And when I say he, I mean Hannibal.
Right.
And Will is searching for someone to just understand him for how he is and who he is. And that leaves him very vulnerable to Hannibal and to Hannibal's manipulation. And you really start to see a lot of that unfold and develop in this, especially when you get to Hannibal and Abigail's relationship, as that's starting to develop, and his role that's gonna play out in that. But I just, visually it's great, especially for a cable show. Every time I watch an episode and I see something different or something shocking or something visually beautiful, I'm still in awe that it's a cable show and they were able to really tell this story the way that they did.
Yeah, to put it on network television back in 2013.
I know.
It's kind of surprising. It kind of fell below the radar. Nobody was really paying attention at first. And by the time they did, it was already established and good to go.
Well, very ahead of its time, I think, too.
Yeah. In a lot of ways.
The story it's telling.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. The relationships are what's going on, and Hannibal is manipulating everyone. He's manipulating Jack and Alana Bloom to help.
Please manipulate me.
Yeah, to help.
I will be manipulated.
All in efforts to push Will back, closer and closer to him. So it's really fascinating. This particular episode centers a lot around Abigail, who wakes up from her coma, and we get interactions as she starts to realize, Will and Hannibal's part and everything. And there's also, they take her back to Minnesota to the house to kind of either help her or figure out what's going on, depending on which character you're looking at the moment. And events happen toward the end that leave her and Hannibal in a really interesting place that it will be interesting to see play out for the rest of the series. But enough about that. We have to find out from Christopher G. Moore, who is a Fannibal among Fannibals. How did it feel revisiting this episode again after 7 years?
It's kind of interesting because I think, like we've talked about before in the first 2 episodes, I'm seeing things that I never noticed before. And by the way, the title potage is a type of thick soup or stew made from meat and vegetables that are boiled together. Mm-hmm. And I guess you sort of see this
people stew.
Yeah, you see people stew, but you also see that Hannibal being around certain characters, his manipulation is seeping into the other characters as he tries to manipulate them. And you have other characters that are trying to manipulate as well. I mean, Abigail is very manipulative.
Very much so.
Yeah, I think that's why Hannibal almost sees, himself as almost like a father figure to that, because he probably sees a little bit of himself in that. But yeah, I think one thing, if you go back and watch this episode, I love the use of there's a technique that they sometimes use in movies where they have like a specific light they'll put in certain areas, so it creates almost like a little light dot on the person's eye or their eyes, and they use that a lot on Hannibal. So you watch certain scenes, like there's that scene where Will Graham is talking about the murder.
Catch lights. That's
catch light. Yeah, and he's talking about the murders, and he talks about that one murder, the Garrett Hobbs murder that was made by a copycat, and he's talking about that, and Hannibal just happens to walk in, and he's staring, and you see that little dot light, and always that adds that element of almost like creepiness or evil.
So then he gives that smirk, though.
He gives that smirk, and he does that a few times. Like at the very end, he almost smiles like, "Oh, man."
I know." It's almost like he's holding it back, right?
Well, yeah, and he's like, "This dude's smart. I'm going to have to screw him up." So you see that, and you'll see that in a few areas actually, where you'll see other characters, and it'll be cut between, and there'll always be that, because it's almost like his evil mechanism is working. We actually use that technique in Gut Punched. When the girl is talking to the guy, when Sarah's our actress Sarah, when she's talking, Sarah Gorski, when she's talking to the guy, and my cinematographer Ish, he used the light on his iPhone
I remember that.
To create the little dot and eyes, because there's it usually means there's some kind of emphasis on that character, and I never really noticed it the first time, but just watching it again, I saw those little cinematic flourishes that adds to the experience without you really knowing, without you thinking about it. And maybe most people won't catch it if you're not into filmmaking or cinema, but it's those things that I think that shows. First of all, David Slade, I think, is an amazing director, and even though they've had different directors throughout the series that have done just as an admirable job. In fact, the next episode is directed by someone else and written by a woman. But yeah, I think there's this episode, and also just seeing Hugh Dancy. I admire his acting style as well.
Yeah. Yes.
Because his delivery, I think, might be off-putting for any other actor, but you really feel that this guy is struggling. This guy is he's like a different pieces of cloth that are just barely holding on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, something is off with this guy, because he's really put himself in deep. Because in one way he's trying to help people, but at the same time he's also delving into his own darkness,
hurting himself.
And you can see that. You can see that his issues. You can see it just with his delivery. I think I posted on Instagram today about, like, there's this one line he says, like, trying to salvage the joke from the mouth of madness, and it's like there's no other show
you could do that.
Where that would make sense. And his delivery made me laugh, because I was like, that's only Will Graham could deliver that.
It's so layered, like you're saying. Everything's so layered, just perfectly.
Yeah, and this whole show, I mean, you have these characters, and I hate to compare it to this, but it almost feels like Shakespeare to some degree. It's very theatrical, but in a good way. Because there's also, like, one of my other favorite lines is when Bloom is talking to Will Graham, and she's like, it's like, I want to say this, but I don't want to say it in an insulting way. And he's like, say it the insulting way. Yeah. I love that line. Things like that are just like, I think just the use of dialogue between characters, or just the flip of a phrase, or even though if you hate Freddie Lowndes, just the way she's another manipulative character in this whole thing, or just even the Abigail. It's like she could easily just be this victim, but she's also very manipulative. Maybe she gets that from her father, but just the phrase she says, to where 1 minute she's like, oh, she's scared or whatever. The next minute she's like, I'm on to you, Hannibal. that thing where she's like, let's role play. You be this, and Hannibal, you be the man on the phone. It's like, oh damn.
Yeah.
I haven't seen these episodes in a little while, and if anything, it just makes me want to watch the episodes again, because I was like, just the different layers to these characters. They're not just, this, we talked about the recent movie Blood Vessel, where we felt the characters are more one-dimensional. These are fully developed, multi-layered characters. It's like like when you get that biscuit, it's got like 20 different layers to it.
Yes.
I mean, to throw another food analogy in there. But yeah, I and I think also this episode, there's a lot of references to stuff from Red Dragon. I mean, they've lifted different lines and paragraphs and ideas from Red Dragon. And also did you catch the reference to Silence of the Lambs?
No.
Remind us.
The dripping of blood from the ceiling. If you
remember that, but I don't. Yeah, but I haven't seen Silence in the Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs, when they're in an elevator and they're taking the body out, and blood drips from the top of the elevator.
I love that. I really, really love that.
So, and there's just little minor references, but just how they sort of, they create their own potage of elements from all these different Harris properties. And it comes in flawless, and it's part of what you're doing, and And then you also have those WTF moments, like when she opens up that pillow.
Yes.
It's got all women's hair in it, It's like
she's having that realization. We use every part.
Use every part, and it's like,
and she's like, what?
Yeah, and then you have that Ed Gein moment, to where it's like, are there nipple belts? Are there skin, chandeliers? I mean, what's going on? I'm sure they probably need to check everything, bedding. There's got to be everything in that house is probably made from humans. So, this. I mean, I'll continue rambling until the end of time because I love this show. But yeah, I think every episode I watch just makes me appreciate the show even more, because now I can, even though I have a memory of some stuff, I also go into it a little bit new and also sort of look at different things I didn't notice before, and just everything in the filmmaking, to the acting, to the dialogue. I think everything just works so well. Even those episodes that might seem kind of weaker than others are still stronger than a lot of the strongest stuff on other shows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I remember at this point, the show hadn't quite caught its following. People were curious about it, but it hadn't quite become Hannibals yet, right? It was kind of really sluggish in the ratings. It wasn't catching on. It wouldn't be long. It's not going to be long before everybody, before the Hannibals start to gather and support the show. Really, it's the love of the Hannibals that I think kept the thing going, right? Wasn't there a time when they wrote in to say, give us season 2 or season 3, or am I imagining that?
Yeah. I mean, there was definitely writing campaigns. There was a lot of things, the big thing was people wearing the little, which you'll see, like the flower crowns and stuff. And there was other things as well, like when we get around to the next episode, that was actually pulled before it was broadcast, because it happened around the time of Sandy Hook.
Ooh.
And so they edited it. So actually the episode you see now in streaming in other places is a more elongated episode than what was
really?
initially released.
The edits. Interesting.
But there was a lot of campaigns, and I remember the time it's like, oh, please don't let this end because this show is so good.
Yes.
And I mean, we're lucky to have been able to get 3 seasons.
Well, that speaks to it being ahead of its time.
Yes,
right?
very much.
It really does, because this is the type of thing right now that I'm sure people are eating up. No pun intended. Like crazy. You have it on Netflix. It's completely accessible to so many people, and it's really good. It's a really good show that I think a lot of people either missed or it was the wrong timing to be on cable, but thankfully it was for how long it was, so that we can have it now to digest.
Yeah, people just didn't catch it on NBC. For me, this one is a little slower paced than most episodes, because we're putting, it's a chess game and we're putting pieces in place on the board. Hannibal's, he's basically, putting his queen over here. He's putting the bishop over there, and he's got his castles on the edges and rooks going on, and a couple pawns. Well, he kills a couple pawns. So he really is getting in there and messing with everything. And what I like about this episode is it ends on an incredibly high note, because we get a real strong glimpse of what Hannibal is capable of. Even though we don't see him kill anybody, we see what he can do when encountering other people, and how he can control the situation and really influence how people behave. And that is incredibly fascinating. And of course, Will is, just so socially awkward and so in need, even though he doesn't want to admit it, of somebody who's on his level as well. It's different than Hannibal, because Hannibal wants somebody to kind of be his partner in crime in a way, right? While Will just needs somebody challenging, right? Just mentally challenging that, isn't threatening, and Hannibal's becoming that person.
I think at this point, Will sees him as a mentor, like mentor-mentee kind of relationship. And what Chris was saying about his fragility just allows him to kind of fall into Hannibal's arms even more. You know, he really lets go of defenses and really is like, finally someone I can talk to freely and openly who's not going to just think I'm a weirdo.
Yeah.
Because what they really send home is that everyone thinks he's a weirdo. He's incapable of controlling his own emotions. He's incapable of having normal relationships with people. He couldn't last in the FBI, right? Because he couldn't handle it mentally. And it seems like Hannibal is the only person who, aside from Jack, who's doing it for selfish reasons. Well, and I mean, Hannibal as well, but it seems like Hannibal is the only person who he can actually go to and just let go.
Yeah.
Just be in that moment.
Yeah, he wants to with Alana, but there's this friction there that's preventing him for some reason.
She's constantly.
What is that?
She's still wanting to be his friend, but still analyzing him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a way that feels almost demeaning, or a bit like talking down to him.
Yeah,
still,
a little bit of that, a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's all these dynamics going on that make this, that they really, with this episode, are really starting to put into place that drive the rest of this season, if not the entire series. I mean, there's elements that start piling in that, you know, get crazy. And you're right, Vanessa. Like when Freddie Lowndes rattles off all the inadequacies, if you will, of Will, you know, all the reasons why not to trust him. You know, he just stands there and, you know, he's shaken, but not. It's really interesting, his body language, and really that's all he's doing. He doesn't say a word, but except for "get out" or something like that. But
yeah, you see it when he like snatches that card from her.
Oh,
that
yeah,
outburst,
yeah.
right? And then
shoves it in his pocket real fast.
Yeah.
So it is fascinating, and
although he does have that one line where he's like, "You don't really want to be messing with someone that." that thinks like a killer for a living or something like that.
Why did he say that?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, dude.
Yeah, that didn't go well. That ended up on
keep your mouth shut, dude.
Was just loving it too.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I know. Jack gives him crap about it, and then he gives Hannibal crap, and he goes, "I didn't know I had to control what he said." You know. But he wasn't going to do it. He wasn't going to stop him.
Oh man, that was great.
All right, well, let's wrap this up. Let's give our final thoughts. Do we give a score? We don't need to give a score. Let's just give a favorite scene. Yeah, we love it. Everything's fives all the way around. Just fives. Every episode's a 5.
Absolutely.
But let's just give kind of our comment about this episode and a favorite scene. Something particular about this episode that stands out for you. And Vanessa, you are up first.
Ooh, me. Yeah, I'm basically turning into Chris at this point because I love this show. I love what they're doing. I love it visually. I love the characters. I love the suspense. I love the procedural aspect to it. There's just so much about it that's right, you know. And it has a little bit of that camp sometimes, right? They push the humor. They push some of the things that they're encountering that. Oh, you know, they're walking that comedic line sometimes, and they do it very, very gracefully, I think. But yeah, I'm just hooked. I'm so hooked on this. Maybe like hooked on antlers.
Oh.
Hooked for good. So I mean, y'all might have wanted this, but I think my favorite scene is watching Will talking about that copycat murderer, and then Jack and Hannibal walking in, and the reaction that Hannibal has, and seeing Will being strong in the role where he can be strong. This is a place where he has authority and where he has knowledge and where he's in control, and you know that that's not the rest of his life. The rest of his life is not in control. And seeing Hannibal walk into that and seeing Will in control like that, talking about this character, dissecting this character, this copycat murderer, is just really, and that's so early on in the episode too. So much more happens in the episode, but that moment is so important. I think, and it really stands out to me. And I'm gonna have to go back and look for those catchlights in the eyes now,
Yes.
and see it, because I think I know what you're talking about, because it's supposed to be the screen, right? He's seeing the screen's reflecting on his eyes, and his eyes are lighting up, but it's just so. It really, you said Shakespearean, and it is theatrical in a way. It's very theatrical, but not. We were talking about camp with the other one. This is not camp in the way that it's theatrical. It's very, it's like a symphony, right? Music is so important in this whole entire series, and every episode kind of feels like a written symphonic piece.
Oh, nice. I like that quite a bit. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Christopher G. Ward, wrap it up your thoughts and give us the favorite scene.
Well, we're still in the early stages of this season, mapping out these characters, and with the Abigail and Will and Hannibal, we're still sort of seeing who they are and how Hannibal is trying to see who they are so that he can sort of figure out ways to manipulate that. And at the same time, when he feels like they're getting too close to him, or getting close to seeing him as he is, he throws a monkey wrench into the works to throw it off, whether that be trying to make Abigail feel guilty for self-defense, or trying to make Will Graham feel guilty that he caused the Abigail's friend's death. So yeah, I think it's really interesting. And I think, I think some people could probably see this episode as being slow, but I think it's methodical in how it's mapping out things, mapping out these characters, seeing their, what they're thinking and how they're thinking, and you see that. I mean, even some of the best moments are not even verbal to some degree. It's just how they look, whether it's Hannibal, when he's looking at, when he walks into that thing and he knows that that Will Graham's basically talking about him, that Will Graham has figured out the type of person he is, and he's like, oh, or even Abigail, you can see it in her eyes, in certain scenes that even that one line about like, you'll be the man on the phone, you see it in her eyes. And you even see it in other characters' eyes as well, So Hannibal will say certain things, and you can see that he's, or when people are talking, you can see it in his eyes how he's sort of reacting, that the other characters may not see it, but we see it as a viewer. So yeah, I think there's so many great things, there's and just how the certain situations reveal themselves. Which, if it's the first time you're watching it, can be kind of shocking, whether it's that first blood drip and you find out what happened, or when she opens up a pillow, which I'm not sure how comfortable it would be to rest your head on that kind of pillow. But yeah, I again, it's another great episode. I think David Slade did a great job directing it. I think it was written by 3 different people, including Bryan Fuller. So it definitely has some really wonderful pieces of dialogue. And it just continues on these characters and how they evolve, and how the manipulations of Hannibal are just really screwing people over for his own benefit, because he loves it. It's like like the chess game. He's making his moves, trying not to be noticed that he's trying to do checkmate in all these characters. So yeah, it's another wonderful episode. There's a lot of great scenes. I mean, I won't pick the same scene as Vanessa, who's definitely trying to copy me.
No,
That's why I get to go first.
How dare you? Because you got bloom eyes. You're manipulating me, aren't you? But I think what I'll probably pick instead is, I know I love any moment where Abigail makes it clear that she knows more than what she thinks
yes.
she is, because she talks about how she lies to people, but then she has those moments where she comes out with some piece of dialogue, and whether that be in her house where she basically calls Will Graham out on who he is, and then basically the sort of like, where I feel like a group of people in a room going, "Oh shit," where she says the whole thing like, "You be my dad, you to be my mom, and you be the man on the phone,"
And Hannibal's reaction to that too. He was, like, I thought he was going to strangle her right there.
Well, and that's the thing, he's definitely holding back, and he got back at her later in the episode. But I think just to see this character that's not just some scared victim character, there's more to her going on, and her ability to call people out, even people that could probably or might kill her later on. I think those moments really stood out to me. I think we always look at the Hannibal and the Will Graham, but I'm really loving the Abigail character more. I'm just seeing the nuance in her reactions and pieces of dialogue that really show that there's some really strong secondary characters that aren't the main characters in the show.
Yeah, we get more of them as the season goes on. I mean, even Freddie Lowndes is really good in this particular.
This is where she really starts to come in, right? Because that's where they find her hair at the scene. How the hell were you here? How did you know?
Yeah.
Because I hate you. I hate her.
I think what I love most about this episode is Mads is coming onto his own and or coming into his own here. There are times when the camera just watches him react and his reactions are so subtle, but yet at the same time, he feels like he's eating up everything, right? With his eyes. He's getting everything. And he's either just analytical, and you get that analytical, or he's reacting to like what is said, and we get to see it because we know more about him because of who that character is than everybody else does. They don't know about all this Silence of the Lambs shit that we do, right? So they don't know. They think Hannibal is just a straight up psychiatrist. They don't know his eating habits. And so we have a little bit more insight into his subtle eyebrow or reaction, right? Or his gruff. And I really love those scenes. And like when he walks in, right? When he walks in and hears Will talking about him, everything is, and it's all in his face, right? There's just this great facial acting, which is kind of rare. Not everybody has that gift, and Mads certainly does have it with this character and uses it widely, or is directed incredibly well. My favorite scene, I'm going to go, since we said Freddie Lowndes, there's a scene later where Freddie Lowndes confronts Will, and I think Jack. Maybe is it Jack or Hannibal out in the park, not in the parking lot, but the driveway, and she's trying to make amends, right? And
that's where he says to try and to salvage the joke from the Mouth of Madness.
Yes, but you see her try to manipulate him, and you see him just clocking ahead. He's like 2.5 steps ahead of her the entire time, but yet still vulnerable to it. It's really fascinating.
By the way, those are the worst cops.
I know.
The whole end scene where there's like, are there no cops behind the house? I mean, all this stuff happens with people getting killed in the house and people like sneaking around the house and Freddie Lowndes sneaking around the house. It's like, are there no cops behind the house? Is there some kind of law?
Did she know he was in there? Because she said that she mentioned that there might be somebody else.
Yeah, I think, and she let Hannibal know, and I think that's why Hannibal went in the house.
Right,
because he knew that.
So she wasn't the only one that snuck in.
Yeah,
but we didn't get to see that. That was subtle. That was kind of, if you weren't paying attention, it would sneak right past you.
I know, and I'm like, because you can see Hannibal like, I'm taking that information.
Thank you. I'll be right back.
Oh, by the way, only Hannibal can wear like a suit jacket and then an underlying thing with a pop collar underneath and pull that off. I was like,
Right?
it was almost like the
Yeah.
preppy version of like a lawyer or something, and he pulls it off masterfully. I mean, if I wore that, I look like a fucking idiot. But he wears it, and he's like that.
Yeah,
You know,
just you
like,
wait. He gets away with wearing.
Well, no, it feels like he's
the
like
most ridiculous stuff.
nobody can touch me. I can wear a pop collar.
I love it. Only him. Only he could.
Yes. All right. Well, there you go. That's our final look at Hannibal, season 1, episode 3, called Potage. If you like what you've seen here, please subscribe below, hit the like button, hit the bell so you get notified. Leave us some comments. Are you enjoying revisiting Hannibal and season 1 and our talking about it? I hope you're watching it on Netflix as we are and getting into all these delicious dishes. Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't like it, we eat through. Just letting you know.
Ba-dum-bum.
Yeah.
All right, Vanessa, Christopher, thank you for joining me.
Oh, I'm always happy to talk about Hannibal. You know me.
Yeah, I am too now.
Absolutely. All right, with that, let's say goodnight.
Good night.
Good night.
Gruesome Magazine.